If I get to stand, a vote for me will be a vote to change Labour, because Labour needs to change. People are losing faith in politics. They deserve a bigger response than politicians have given them before.
So if Andy Burnham wins the Makerfield by-election, will you set out a timetable to stand down?
No, I'm not going to do that. I will be backing 100% whoever the candidate is.
Show that he's an incredibly popular Mayor of Greater Manchester, and he's very popular in that part of the world, and he's certainly a politician that has huge amounts to offer in
So why
Labour's
wouldn't you want him
fight.
as your leader then? Do you think he's just not listening?
I think he's not listening. I think that's been part of the problem for a long time, is that the Prime Minister doesn't listen.
This ain't his first time at the rodeo. Here's what Andy Burnham said in his first unsuccessful Labour leadership bid 16 years ago.
I have a very clear vision of how I want to rebuild Labour for new times. Reconnecting Labour. Reconnecting Labour with its own grassroots, with the wider Labour family.
And here he is today.
Britain, if you look at the last 50 years, Britain has been on the wrong path. 40 years on the wrong path. People are losing faith in politics.
It's a remarkably consistent message, and at the third time of asking, it's possible he might even get to deliver on his pledge to change Britain, if he can only persuade the current occupant of number 10 to move on. Today, he's digging in.
I do want to fight the next election.
But the Manchester mayor won't get anywhere near Downing Street if he can't win the Makerfield by-election first. And that might have got just a little bit more difficult after his leadership opponent, Wes Streeting, reopened Labour's internal strife over Brexit, saying he'd like to lead the UK back into the EU. Leave-supporting voters in Makerfield won't be happy about that. So no wonder Burnham's trying to park the issue.
I am not proposing that the UK considers rejoining the EU. I respect the decision that was made at the referendum.
Sounds like another of Burnham's famous political flip-flops, because here he is just a few months ago at the Labour Party conference.
Shouldn't we start calling out the disaster that Brexit has been more directly? I think we absolutely should.
Burnham likes to be all things to all people, giving rise to the famous Westminster joke: a Blairite, Brownite, Corbynite and Starmerite walk into a Manchester bar and the barman says, "What can I get you, Andy?" He's a fast learner, though, and willing to listen to advice on one subject at least. After being caught in these skimpy little running shorts, this morning he'd opted for something altogether more decent. This man means business. So Andy Burnham's had to clarify a couple of his positions today on the EU and tonight on fiscal rules and spending. We've also got some exclusive new polling dropping right now. Our deputy political editor, Sam Coates, will talk us through that. But first, let's go to our political correspondent, Alex Rogers, in Parliament, who's just come from a meeting of Labour MPs taking place in the last hour. Alex.
Low affair tonight. It was Yvette Cooper, the Foreign Secretary, who was addressing MPs, but it was pretty sparsely attended, and that's because they're on a one-line whip, which means they're not under strict instruction to be here. And number 10 may well be happy about that, given the mood. I've been speaking to a few MPs about what it's like, what it feels like to be a Labour MP right now. One of them said, "I think a lot of my colleagues want to back a winner, and they don't know who that is." Another said, "The way this has all unfolded is quite sad. Everyone is just in limbo where we know he is going to go and we just don't want to talk about it." So I think many feel that Keir Starmer is in denial at the moment about his future, and they're all waiting for this make or break by-election in Makerfield with all eyes on Andy Burnham and whether he can win it.
And Alex, Team Burnham have given an update on Brexit and also the fiscal rules that Rachel Reeves been sticking to rigidly. Tell us about that.
So it looks like Andy Burnham's trying to preempt some of the criticism that he's likely to get if he enters this leadership contest. A few months ago, he suggested that Britain was too in hock to the bond markets. And today, he's saying in an interview with Bloomberg that he would stick to Rachel Reeves' fiscal rules. Now, in addressing one problem and addressing those critics, he may find he has some others, because he has made his pitch a left-wing one. He's talked about bringing more things into public ownership, and people have interpreted that as he is prepared to spend more and offer a more radical agenda. So in trying to address one problem, he may just create another.
So for tonight. And we're also joined by Labour MP Alex Davies-Jones, who resigned as a minister last week and called for the PM to go. Alex, so you quit on Tuesday, I believe it was, though it seems like such a long time since then. I mean, had you expected an avalanche of sort of similar resignations and that would then persuade the Prime Minister himself to quit? Is that what you thought? No.
Honestly, Cathy, it was one of the hardest decisions I've ever had to make. But given the results in Wales a week last Friday, which were catastrophic, over 100 years in power for Welsh Labour, decimated to less than 10% of all the seats in the Senedd now, having nationalists in power in every corner of the United Kingdom, it's terrifying. And the Prime Minister's reaction to that was to appoint Harriet Harman and Gordon Brown, two people I have immense respect for, yet two Labour grandees from 20 years ago. And the speech on Monday, that was meant to be another reset speech, left a lot to be desired. It didn't convince me that the Prime Minister had the vision and the drive to go forward. And when I saw brave colleagues declaring that they had no confidence in the Prime Minister, I couldn't sit there in government and just let things carry on knowing that I felt the same.
It was interesting, though, there was a bit of a delay between your resigning and Wes Streeting quitting. Would it have been nice if senior colleagues had sort of rode in behind you?
Look, that is for them to decide. Everyone has their own decision to make about what is best for them and what they think is best for the country and our party. But ultimately, I felt that I couldn't continue in government supporting Keir Starmer as our Prime Minister, and I felt I did the right thing.
And you were very clear in your resignation letter that you believed the Prime Minister needed to set a timetable for his own departure. You've seen him today. He's digging in. Do you think he's just not listening?
I think he's not listening. I think that's been part of the problem for a long time, is that the Prime Minister doesn't listen. And it's a big shame because he is a good man, and I've worked with him very closely for the last 2 years, particularly on tackling violence against women and girls. And I've seen his passion and his commitment for that. However, he is not the right person to lead us into a next election, whenever that may be. We've got council elections in Wales next year. We need to be taking that fight to reform and to Plaid Cymru. And I don't feel that Keir Starmer is the right person to do that.
When you say he's not listening, why do you think that is?
I think he struggles to make decisions. I think he is someone who finds debate quite difficult, and when there are conflicting ideas between government departments, for example, it is something that has been a point of contention for a long time. And yes, I mean, look, he's had a lot to deal with on the international stage. There's a lot happening at a global level right now, which has meant that he has had to be out of the country, leading for us and representing the United Kingdom in that space. However, there are a lot of domestic issues here that need addressing as well. And quite frankly, things have been far too slow. We've had far too many U-turns. We've had far too many disastrous communication messages, and we need to do better. The country deserves better.
You, if I may say so, you seem pretty angry.
I'm frustrated. We waited 14 years to get into government, and the country needs us to do better. My community in Pontypridd needs us to do better, and they sent a very clear message last week when they voted against Welsh Labour, and that hurts. That really hurts.
I'm sure if the Prime Minister were here, he would say, as he did in the clip earlier, that he won an election, he got a mandate, he's got a mandate for many more years. It was a landslide. He's entitled to stand in any leadership contest, isn't he, that emerges?
He is, and that is a decision for him to make. However, when the message from the country is overwhelming rejection, when there is a lack of confidence within the Parliamentary Labour Party, I think serious questions need to be asked, and that is why I believe that we need a new leader of our party.
And so who should that new leader be? Are you a Wes Streeting fan or an Andy Burnham man?
I like both of them. I have worked closely with both of them. I've worked closely with Wes in government on delivering, as I've said, the Violence Against Women and Girls strategy. I've worked close with Andy Burnham on trying to bring forward the Hillsborough Law. And when we had that horrific terrorist attack at the Heaton Park Synagogue, I got to stand with Andy in solidarity with our Jewish community in Manchester. Both of them are outstanding politicians in their own right. Right now, Wes is the only one who has sort of declared that he will stand to be leader. Wes is someone I respect and admire greatly, and I am looking forward to seeing him outline a policy debate and having that argument that we need as a party about where we go next.
Well, he's already said he wants to take the UK back into the EU at some point. That's the kind of bold plan, perhaps, that you set out in your resignation letter, asked the Prime Minister to follow. Are you impressed by that, or do you think it reopens old divisions?
Well, look, I think we need to be having the debate. And for far too long, we've been afraid to have this conversation because we've been scared of upsetting a certain demographic. I voted Remain. However, my community voted to leave quite overwhelmingly. And I respect that mandate. However, that was over 10 years ago. And if we are serious about economic growth in our country, if we are serious about driving forward together on defence and security, then of course our future is with Europe. I'm not necessarily saying that belongs in Europe, but we definitely need a closer relationship with Europe. They're our closest trading partner, for example. But we need to have that conversation.
Right. But Andy Burnham's shut that conversation down, hasn't he? Because he needs it like a hole in the head in Makerfield. Do you respect that? Well,
again, that's for Andy Burnham to do. I think if we are to really look forward around what is best for the country, then we need to be having these conversations. Where are our trade deals? Where is that advancing relationship? That's what we need to be having.
Andy Burnham is briefing out tonight that he would keep the fiscal rules if elected. Do you think that's sensible?
Look, we are sadly in hock to the bond markets at the moment, and nobody wants to cause unnecessary instability to the economy. That is not what we want. I mean, lots of people have accused me of causing chaos by resigning from government. However, I would say that the government was already in chaos, given the disastrous election results we had and the fact that we are stifled and things are stagnant. We haven't got time to waste, and I don't want this to drag on any longer, which is why I'm urging the Prime Minister to set out that timetable for his departure so that we can have that honest debate about ideas in our party about where we go next, because the country needs it.
And if Andy Burnham did win in Makerfield, which would be quite a feat given the standing of reform there, he would deserve, wouldn't he, to be crowned Labour leader. You all get behind him, all unite around him.
I don't think anyone deserves to be crowned Labour leader. It's not nothing that nobody is entitled to. It is for our membership to decide who is the leader of our party, and I am excited for our members to have that debate.
But you want a proper contest?
I do. I think we need one, but a short one. It doesn't need to be dragged on for months on end, but we do deserve that open public debate and on discourse about where next for the country, where next for our party.
Whoever's picked after that contest would have a mandate from the membership. They wouldn't have a mandate from voters in the country, would they? They'd have to go for an election, general election, wouldn't they?
Well, we don't have to go for a general election. The public voted for our party at the last general election.
They voted for Keir Starmer at the helm of it, though, didn't they?
They voted for the Labour Party. They didn't vote for a person. We don't have a presidential system in our country. They voted for the party to lead them into government. And sadly, however, we have seen that actions taken by the government were not in our manifesto, whether that be cuts to winter fuel, cuts to welfare, things that have been massive in terms of losing voter trust. And that's the things that we need to win back.
And do you think whoever wins has to bring their opponent into the cabinet? So, for example, if it is Andy Burnham, Wes Streeting could become Chancellor or something like that. Do you think the party's got to unite?
I fundamentally believe the party needs to unite. It's something that has been an issue for far too long in our party, where, again, different ideas, different courses of debate have been shut down for fear of upsetting certain communities or demographics, and that's wrong. The party that I am a member of has always proudly been one of free debate and ideas, and I want to see that return again. I want everyone's ideas to be valued, and sadly that hasn't really had its space.
I mean, there has been this briefing, hasn't there, that Wes Streeting could become Chancellor in an Andy Burnham government. Is that another example of, entitlements that are carving up the jobs before the elections even happen?
I haven't seen that. Again, I'm not... I don't think anyone is entitled to any job or any position in the Labour Party or in government. It is to be earned. And that is what I'm looking forward to, is having this debate of ideas.
Right. It's a silly thing, really, but, you know, we've had Andy Burnham running several days. He seems to have taken advice on his running shorts. He's opted for a longer pair. Was that wise?
I am not going to sit here and be a hypocrite. I will call out any man who tells a woman what to wear, and it is not for me to sit here as a woman and tell a man what to wear. If he's comfy, happy and content, then crack on. He can wear what he wants.
It's amazing how many men running for leadership or whatever are pictured in their running shorts, though, isn't it?
I mean, good on them.
What is that?
Exercise is good for you, Cathy. I think it's healthy, and yeah, it's great to see.
It's not trying to show a sort of energy for the job.
I mean, if it is, great. That's what we need.
Well, we'll come back to you in just a second, but Alex, thanks very much for now, because let's try again with Sam Coates and that exclusive polling we promised you. Sam, what have you got for us?
We do have some exclusive polling from YouGov, and it's a group we don't often hear from. It's Labour members, quite hard to poll, but this tells you what the people who will vote in the leadership contest think. And here is their verdict, who they would pick first in the event that there is an election. And you can see Keir Starmer gets 31%, which is quite a lot less than Andy Burnham, the clear front runner. But look at this, two people that we've been talking a lot about in recent weeks, they're barely on the leaderboard. Angela Rayner on 8% and Wes Streeting down on 4%. Now, let's look at what happens if two of those figures go head to head. First of all, Andy Burnham and Keir Starmer. Let's look at the results. 37% for Keir Starmer, 59% for Andy Burnham. If there is a contest between those two, the Metro Mayor of Manchester wins hands down. But say, hypothetically, that Keir Starmer decides he doesn't want to contest it, and someone like Wes Streeting gets in there and challenges Andy Burnham. Well, let's look at those results. Oh, my goodness. Look at that. Wes Streeting down on just 10% of the vote to Andy Burnham's 80%. All this talk of does he have the numbers last week? He doesn't have the numbers amongst Labour members, according to YouGov. That's quite painful. Now, it's not good news for Keir Starmer. 33% want him to stand down pretty much immediately. 33% again want him to stand down before the next election at some point. Just 28%, barely more than a quarter, actually want him to lead Labour into the next election. So much is going to depend on what happens when Andy Burnham contests this by-election in Greater Manchester, in Makerfield. So we asked voters at large what they think of that and who do they want to win. And actually, Andy Burnham comes out on top, 29% to Reform's 21%. But look at this. We specifically took those in the north of England, and you can see where Andy Burnham is the candidate. If you live in the north of England, you want the Metro Mayor of Manchester to win that contest. Quite a lot more than Reform. In quite a lot of polls, Reform's doing pretty well. It's pretty popular, but not if you say the Makerfield constituency and you name Andy Burnham. Obviously, that's just a view of people in the north of England. All adults, the constituency will be different, but this gives a flavour of attitude, positive attitudes, the positive brand of Andy Burnham in that part of the world. Good results, this poll, for Andy Burnham. Terrible for Wes Streeting. Let's see what happens.
Sam, that was definitely worth the wait. I'm just going to pop one question to you, Alex, before I bring in the other guests on the sofa. Very striking how low Angela Rayner was scoring in that. And I wonder, when is Labour going to get a female leader?
It's a good question. And, yeah, hopefully one day, maybe this time.
Well,
who knows?
It doesn't look like it, does it?
Who knows? I mean, look, we still haven't had a contest declared yet. We don't know who will step forward to put themselves in that lineup to potentially become the leader of our party. So, yeah, maybe a woman will come out of the woodworks.
But do you hope Angela Rayner stands?
I hope that a woman stands, definitely, yes. I hope we have that opportunity to have that debate, to have that discussion about ideas, whoever that may be.
Well, Craig McKinley and Laura Pidcock are on the sofa listening to that. Laura, first, we just pick up on that final point. Has it got to be a sort of varied contest, in your view, featuring a woman and various other people, or just crown Andy Burnham? Looking at those figures in that poll, he's streets ahead, isn't he?
I think all of this, to be completely honest, feels so tiresome. I think some of the polling there, you know, the devastating polling for Wes Streeting and slightly better for Andy Burnham is symbolic of a politics at play here, and people saying, we want a change. Wes Streeting is continuity, Starmer, but so will be Burnham. And this is a fundamental problem that we have in politics now. It's really difficult to sit and listen to resigning being one of the hardest political moments of your career and things like that, when actually we are living in a society where over 14 million people are in poverty, 4 million of those are children. We've just watched a Labour government be complicit in a genocide in Gaza, in many...
You know that word is disputed.
The word genocide is not disputed.
In that context, we're sort of off the point of the Labour leadership battle.
This is important because if we are thinking about why there is such a huge amount of discontent at the polls, we have to look at the record of the Labour government. They were voted on this mantra of change. No change has come because they will not challenge the status quo. And I'll just say one thing about Keir Starmer and his path to power, if you like. He showed everybody his homework, his working out about what he would be like as a Prime Minister. He has become a Prime Minister of a creeping authoritarianism within the state. But the cards were on the table there in his path to power. You know, if you think about him in opposition and some of the decrees that were going to constituency Labour parties, curtailing debate on things, if you look at the retrospective prescription of left organisations within the Labour Party to rid the Labour Party of a socialist left element, all of that told you exactly what kind of Prime Minister he was going to be. So it really doesn't wash with me, these cynical resignations now at a time when, you know, we've just gone through the most horrific genocide and a Labour government which has done nothing for the poorest people in society.
Craig, I want to come back to the central story today, which is Brexit, or it has been. I mean, you know, you saw the figures there with Andy Burnham and how he is responding to Brexit. He doesn't want to talk about it on the doorstep, does he? Wes Streeting, the least popular, doesn't look like he's going to get to enact his hope of taking the UK back into the EU. Is it all ancient history now?
Well, it doesn't seem to be. I hoped it was. I feel I'm sort of intruding on family grief this afternoon. And I have to say, I think Burnham's legs are better than mine. But I'd hoped that 2016 we had that biggest democratic vote that this country has ever seen, and we had a vote for Brexit. Now, perversely, because we've got Brexit, we have given this government, this Labour government, with a massive supermajority that can do, frankly, whatever it likes, because it's got a majority to do so, we've given it the tools to do what is needed for the UK. If you go back into the EU or into a reset or any other word you want to call it, you end up clipping your wings of government, whether that is on how borders work, whether that's international trade, whether it's even renationalising steel, I think you'd struggle to do within an EU sort of context. So
Alex,
we've given you an inheritance to do whatever you like for this country, and seemingly a large proportion of the Labour Party, Andy Burnham particularly, has showed his colours in the past, wants to go back into that straitjacket where this country can't do all the things it might want to do to create growth or do whatever else it wants. So I'm really saddened that we might have to have this huge argument all over again, rather than the Labour Party that is governing this country making use of the opportunities to make the best for this country.
Nobody wants to reopen that argument.
Well, it's almost saying, we don't know what to do, we'll let
nobody
the EU
wants to do
anyway.
that at all. And I hope I was quite clear in terms of that's not what I'm saying, that's not what I think Wes was saying, that's not what I think Andy Burnham was saying. What we are saying is that our country was fundamentally broken before Brexit, whether that was years of Tory austerity, whether that was massive decline in our public services as a result of that austerity. Now, we can debate whether or not that was Europe's fault, but the fact that our country is still seeing the impact of that is quite telling. And we need to have that honest conversation about...
We talk about growth. You want to go back
How
to
do
the
you go
EU
for growth?
yourself?
No, I didn't.
OK, you're almost blaming the EU or blaming Brexit for the state we're in.
I think we need to be honest about the fact that Brexit has made our country poorer. It has made it more difficult for our local businesses.
We're not paying £25 billion a year as a contribution.
It's made it more difficult for us to be closest to our allies.
We've got a trade and cooperation agreement, first in class around the world to deal with the EU.
My community, my country of Wales, benefited massively from European regional development funding. It was probably the biggest recipient of that in the South Wales valleys, yet they still voted overwhelmingly to leave because whether or not they felt like that was what they needed to do, whether or not because they were duped into believing slogans on the side of a bus, nobody wants to reopen this. But what we do need to talk about is how do we build economic growth in our country? How do we secure our borders? How do we look at being closer to our allies in Europe? Because given the situation with America and Trump, then that's where we need to be.
Yeah, but isn't that partly what Laura was saying about, the politics is broken? Laura, perhaps expand on that.
I mean, it's just so difficult to hear that the manifesto going into the general election said change, and there has been none, and that is because the Labour Party is redundant of ideas. There has been no challenge to Starmer before huge electoral defeats. It all seems entirely cynical.
Yeah, but to give Alex credit, she would make the same argument about, Keir Starmer wasn't delivering. That's why you went.
Well, it was one of the reasons why I went, yes. I think the catastrophic losses in the elections were one of the big reasons, but also the frustration that I felt with not delivering quick enough.
No, but hold on, Alex. There was a 2 to 3 year process before power where policy was formulated, and that was about fiscal rules, which meant baked-in austerity. Where were the protests then? Where were the protests when thousands of people were being expelled from the Labour Party? Where were the protests and resignations when we were sending spy flights over Gaza with we don't know what the Israeli government were doing with that surveillance?
I'm not apologising for expelling anti-Semites from the party. I mean, that's something I will not apologise for.
That is clearly outrageous that we're talking about...
There was a problem with anti-Semitism in the Labour Party.
Honestly, yes. Here we go again. Not only are we rehashing the debate about the European Union, but the crisis that was manufactured inside the Labour Party. I just said we're talking about the retrospective expelling of left organisations, and that was, I have no shame for expelling anti-Semites. Look at the conflation of the two there. Absolutely outrageous. I was talking about how there was no challenge whatsoever in the path to power, where all of the debates were being held at the NEC, at the Policy Forum, for these politicians...
Can I tell you why people are frustrated in this country?
All of these people that are now resigning were complicit in the politics that we see now.
The Labour Party had 14 years in opposition to create a formula for government. They landed in government with their supermajority and seemingly had no clue what to do with it. Now, they've certainly created change. If you're a youngster, your chance of getting a job is substantially diminished. Europe is now laughing at our figures for youth unemployment, where we used to laugh at theirs. So there has been really significant bad change. But that's getting on to politics. And I'm not here to talk politics. I'm here to speak and inquire what the people of Makerfield think of this.
Exactly. And just on that
What do they think? They must think, are you taking us for fools? We're going to have an election locally that they don't particularly want. They elected a guy, Josh, just a couple of years ago. It's going to cost £250,000 for an election. And if...
On the other hand, they get to nominate a Prime Minister, potentially.
If he wins, you're then going to have a mayoral election, which costs £4.7 million. So £5 million just for the vanity of one candidate who feels that he wants to be Prime Minister.
Do you think
now, I'm thinking about Brenda from
Brenda
Bristol.
From Bristol, not another one.
I don't know, Madge from Makerfield will be saying, oh, no, not one. And if he wins, there'll be two in quick succession.
So
but I think that people don't like to be used as fools and pawns.
So should
and I
your
think
party
people in
sit this one
Makerfield...
out?
No, the Conservative Party is a national political party. It has to stand every time there's an election. That is what political parties do.
You've been quite close to reform, well, maybe the predecessor of reform, but no love lost between you and Nigel Farage. You'll fight him tooth and nail.
Not tooth and nail. I think there is time in the future where we have to appreciate, if you're a right-of-centre person, as I am, I think the left will unite at the next general election. You'll have Greens making way for Labour, making way for Plaid, making way for SNP, and whatever other, colourful parties of the left, a rainbow alliance.
Alex,
and I think the right needs to be very careful about that.
No, I am shaking my head.
May have to have some discussions.
Because, as I've said, there are nationalists in power in every corner of the United Kingdom now, and that terrifies me. As a proud Welsh woman, but as a proud British woman who feels that the UK has a place in not just here with our country, but in the world, that really does terrify me. And the politics of separatism terrifies me. And that is not something that I would endorse or support in any way, shape or form.
Alex, we agree. We agree.
We do. Laura, a lot of the people who voted for Jeremy Corbyn are now in the Green Party. Would you like to see a sort of broader alliance of the left, unite the left?
I think what's interesting is you talked about unite the left. I don't think that many people now would consider the Labour Party to be of the left at all. Because we have to keep coming back to this question. What in practice has changed for people with a Labour government?
Highest tax rates ever.
We've got a more authoritarian government. There was no
lowest NHS waiting lists.
There was no repealing in full of the anti-trade union legislation that was put in place by Thatcher. No repealing, which was gutted. I helped draft the first edition of that. It was gutted by the Labour government and reduced to not really anything transformational for working class people. And also, we cannot forget, and I know people don't want me to talk about it, but there has been an enduring genocide in Gaza over the last
Laura,
2 years.
you know, I'm only picking up on it because it is a disputed terminology, and we're not debating that tonight.
Okay.
We're debating the elections and the sort of general political positioning.
What I think is so frustrating for people watching shows like this and elsewhere is that you don't get demonstrations every single week by tens of thousands of people for no reason whatsoever. You can't just ignore that. That will be at the ballot box.
I think this is simmering anti-Jewish sentiment that has been kicking around in the left for some time, and they're now openly allowed to do it on the streets.
What is interesting, at Declassified UK, we've reported on the spy flights, we've reported on the military agreements between the UK and Israel, which are quite secretive. We've reported on so much of this, and it isn't picked up more broadly. I'm not sure why. But to then conflate it with, a growing anti-Semitism, there are Jewish blocs on these demonstrations. You mustn't do that. It's so dangerous.
We'll discuss all of this another time, and we have done in the past, and we will do that.
Now, I can see that people want to move on, but
Laura, we've got to
Laura,
end this bit.
what I want to know is, what does the man and woman who go to the Doncaster pub think? They are not fixated with Gaza. They are fixated with having a job, having a family that's got opportunities, and how much tax are they paying, and does the world feel right for them? And they do not feel right at the moment, and that is why they're thoroughly annoyed.
And I get that people like to do this either-or thing. You either care about your home and your wages. I started by talking about the 14.3 million people in poverty that the Labour government have done nothing about.
We scrapped the two-child limit.
And that will take some children out of poverty, no doubt. It was a good thing to get rid of that. But we are talking about fundamental change. That is what is necessary.
Well, dynamic economy would be a nice place to start, and they've managed to destroy that.
You can keep debating in just a second, but I need to say thank you to Alex. Thank you very much for coming and explaining why you quit for the first time. I know you haven't spoken publicly before, so really appreciate you doing that. Thank you.
I've said, I don't know how many times, that I'm not going to walk away. I feel very strongly that I must serve the people who voted me into office.
I've just been watching the Prime Minister. He's surfaced after a few days. He was in the bunker. He's been asked repeatedly whether he will set a timetable for his resignation, whether he'll quit. He's absolutely adamant that he won't. He makes the point that he has a duty to serve, as he puts it, subtly needling his opponents by reminding them that he won an election on a landslide not 2 years ago. So he has a mandate, begging the question, whoever succeeds him, they don't necessarily have that very same mandate. Would they have to call an election, which would be a very risky business for Labour? On the central issue of Brexit, he treads a very careful path. He's not nearly as gung-ho as Wes Streeting on rejoining the EU, which again makes me think that whoever succeeds him might find the job of leading this fractured party and fractured country rather more difficult than they think. Hello,
Hi.
Come on in.
Nice to see you. How are you doing?
Come and sit on the
nice,
the
very
almost
nice
famous sofa. Yeah, it's very comfortable actually.
It's very good, yeah.
Jake, you're setting out an overhaul of the youth justice system, including jailing parents whose kids commit a crime. And I just wonder whether jailing the parents will really help rehabilitate the kids.
Well, first of all, we don't expect jailing of parents to be a common part of a youth justice system, but perhaps in the most extreme examples it might be. And what we're trying to do, and I think your viewers would appreciate this, that when a child is on the cusp of getting into trouble or indeed gets into trouble, there's a role for government, there's a job for the courts, the police, agencies, but also it's quite right to expect family members and parents to play a key role in trying to turn around a young person's life. And that can be about offering them support. There might be needs that those parents have that means that would help them encourage their child. But also, it's right that there is some stick as well. And parenting orders is a way of looking again at how we can best involve family members in the rehabilitation of their child.
Do you think that Labour and, Liberal parties have sort of let parents off the hook a bit? There's been too little focus on, their responsibility.
I think it's too often when you're in government, you try and pull the levers that are there in front of you, when in fact it's for all of us, communities, wider society and indeed families, to play a role in how we bring up our young people. That's common sense in my mind, but perhaps when you're sitting in Whitehall, when you're sitting in the Ministry of Justice where my predecessors have sat, they don't look at that bigger picture and too often just pull the levers that are in front of them. And actually, parenting orders is a good example where we used to have around 1,000 a year. Last year, there was only 33. So they're not working. And the plan we set out today, one part, very small part of the plan, is to try and look at those again and see how we can make sure families are at the heart of turning around young people's lives, which makes complete sense.
It's a very interesting idea. It's an interesting, provocative white paper. But, I mean, who's to say that, within weeks you could have a new Labour leader who just rips it up?
Well, I don't think that's going to happen.
Really?
This white paper is about a long-term vision.
Have you seen the betting market?
This is, betting markets have been wrong before, Cathy, as I've learnt. But look, you've got this white paper is about a long-term vision for the youth justice system. And actually, there's been cross-party consensus on the importance of trying to get early intervention for our young people around turning around young people's lives when they do enter the criminal justice system. I was in the House of Commons earlier today, and actually from across the House of Commons, I think there was a general acceptance this is the right direction of travel when it comes to our youth justice system. So I'm confident that what we've published today will lead to a generational transformation of our youth justice system. It's something I'm very proud of.
But to come back to my point, Keir Starmer today says he wants to fight the next election. I want to be a supermodel. It's not going to happen, is it?
Well, don't give up yet, Cathy. It's, look, Keir Starmer is our Prime Minister. Today we've had really important economic news, which shows that actually a lot of the difficult decisions we've made in the first period in office have protected us from economic instability from abroad. He's got a job to do. He's been in public service for decades. This is a man that I think takes every day as it comes and is in the business of government, and that's what's really important.
So you'd be happy to put yourself forward for election in Rother Valley if he's at the helm, the next election?
The next election's 3 years away, and yes...
Oh, so maybe not... Oh, right, OK, well, yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I want this Labour government to succeed. And look, the election results, they were only 10 days ago. Seems like a lifetime ago, but only 10 days ago were devastating for the Labour Party, and particularly in areas like mine. We didn't have elections, but in South Yorkshire, in Barnsley, in Sheffield, we had devastating results. Now, it's right that we look at what that means, why we need to change course, whether that's the nature of the change, the pace of the change we're delivering.
Or a change at the helm. You do accept that is now a possibility.
Well,
I know you've got to play the game.
I think that conversation, that debate should have happened in a calm manner. Perhaps I was naive. And in the last 10 days, it hasn't been calm. It's been chaotic, and I accept that that has a lot of ramifications. But I think we're now in a new period where there is a possibility to have some of these debates whilst getting on with governing the country, which is ultimately the most important thing to your viewers.
You put out a tweet last week saying it was the right decision to allow Andy Burnham to stand in Makerfield. Why is it right now, but it was wrong less than 4 months ago when he was barred from standing in Gorton and Denton?
Well, two reasons. One, we lost Gorton and Denton. So I think you have to learn your lessons. When you lose elections, it's right that you learn lessons, which is why I think it's right that we look at the lessons from 10 days ago. But secondly, and importantly, back then, it was quite clear that Andy Burnham standing as the candidate in Gorton and Denton might have been a distraction, whereas now it's right, the context has changed, and it's right that we put him forward, and the vast swathe of a Labour Party wanted him to be allowed to stand as the candidate. Candidate selection hasn't happened just yet. So, look, when politics changes, you've got to ensure that your decision-making adapts to the new context, and I think it's right that the Prime Minister did that. And, look, I think the vast majority of the Labour Party is behind that move.
And not necessarily behind the Prime Minister. But, I mean, if it's a fight of his life versus reform, against reform there, if he wins that, doesn't he deserve the Labour Party to unite around him as a new leader, a coronation, really?
Well, let's see what happens in that by-election. It's going to be a fight because, as I said 10 days ago in Makerfield, Reform won convincingly, and Andy Burnham, if he is the candidate selection is still a few days away, has the fight of his life. And I'm going to be joining him there. I'm going up on Friday. I'm going to be knocking on doors for whoever the Labour Party candidate is, because we have a massive challenge to defeat Reform, whether it's in Makerfield or, in fact, across the country, and I'll do whatever I can to help that fight.
But if he does win, you've accepted how tall a challenge that is. He would surely then be the next Labour leader. I mean, let's not beat about the bush.
There's lots of twists and turns before we don't even have the date of the by-election yet. So
I know, but...
the politics moves very quickly, as we've seen in the last 10 days. I don't think we should get too far ahead of ourselves. I think, look, if Andy Burnham is the candidate, if he's able to beat Reform in Makerfield, it will show that he's an incredibly popular mayor of Greater Manchester, and he's very popular in that part of the world, and he's certainly a politician that has huge amounts to offer in Labour's fight.
So why wouldn't you want him as your leader, then?
Well, because there's lots of politicians who have a huge amount to offer. Wes Streeting, who's no longer in the Cabinet, is someone who's incredibly talented.
So you'd like to see a proper contest, an orderly contest?
No. I think we need to get behind the Prime Minister in making sure that over the next 3 years, we've got 3 years till the next general election, we deliver the change that people voted for back in 2024. Now, there's a huge challenge, and it's right that there is a debate about how we deliver that change, the nature of that change, the pace of that change, what has gone wrong in the first 2 years that we can put right over the next 3 years. I think that can be done, that debate, that conversation can be a calm conversation with some reflection.
What, with Andy Burnham as Chancellor or something like that?
Well, no, but this is what I mean, though. When politics isn't just about moving pieces on a chessboard or different personalities at the top.
No, but it is about leadership,
about ideas.
Isn't it? It's about ideas, leadership.
It's about strategy, and it's about communicating with the British people.
Is it about
and delivering
leadership
for
as well?
British people. Of course it's about leadership, but, the Prime Minister won at general election less than 2 years ago, and in 2019, when he became leader in the early months of 2020, no one thought that was possible. In 2021, when we lost the Hartlepool by-election, nobody thought it was possible. So he's come back from difficult positions before, and we'll see what happens over the months and years ahead. He's got a big challenge, but we've all got a big challenge.
Yeah.
I'm part of his government. I'm part of his parliamentary Labour Party. This is a team effort, and I don't think we can put all the blame at one man's door. So
you referenced there Keir Starmer winning that landslide. If he steps down as leader, someone else comes in, they would have to have a general election, wouldn't they? They wouldn't have a mandate otherwise.
Well, look, Kath, I'm not going to speculate. There's no challenge. There's clear rules about how you have a leadership contest in the Labour Party. It's very clear as day. I used to be a lawyer. I like to look to rules. You have to challenge with 81 signatures to back your nomination. No one's come forward with that. Until that happens, I'm not going to comment on what might happen in the future.
Wes Streeting has made it clear that he would like to join a contest if there is one. Andy Burnham has set out his vision
You said that
today.
you might want to be a supermodel. We've all got aspirations.
Right. That's as likely, is it? Wes Streeting wins the leadership.
If you want to challenge the Prime Minister, there's very clear rules how to do it, and that's how you kickstart a contest. And I think sort of speculating about who might be in any future contest is... Look, I'm not criticising the lobby and Westminster journalists, but I can see why it's a fun conversation, but it's not how we do things when we're in government.
Andy Burnham briefing out that he'd keep the fiscal rules. Would you welcome that? Has there got to be stability in the markets?
I'm a strong supporter of stability in the markets because we saw what happened on the last Conservative government where they switched leaders, they gave up on that fiscal discipline, and we saw what happened. And the Conservatives lost the last general election. In fact, their brand and their reputation is so damaged now, it's unlikely they're going to be able to come back anytime soon. So we've got to keep that fiscal discipline. And that's why, the Prime Minister and Rachel Reeves have been absolutely clear. Even when it's really difficult, they've stuck to that fiscal discipline. And actually, the economic news we saw from the IMF today shows that has paid off, that we're in a strong position, or stronger position going into what is really unstable times with everything that's happening in the Middle East and indeed in Ukraine.
And Wes Streeting thinks we'd be in a stronger position economically if the UK rejoined the EU. I mean, your constituency, 66% of your constituents voted to leave. What would be your advice to Wes on wanting to rejoin the EU?
Well, look, there's two things there. First of all, yes, my constituents, two-thirds of them voted to leave the European Union. When I speak to them about Brexit, I don't think many of them think it's going great. I don't think they all voted for Brexit and think it's suddenly improved their communities, their town centres,
so time to change their minds, get them back in?
There's two different things, isn't there? There's about reappraising our relationship with the European Union, which this government is doing. We've already done a number of deals, whether it's on economic security or our defence alliance. That's incredibly important for our economy and our security. But when you talk about rejoining the EU, that's, is not on the agenda. It's not on the table anytime soon. Right. It can be a pipe dream. And actually, you know, I've seen the conversation about Andy Burnham and Wes Streeting and any differences. Wes said one day, perhaps. Andy Burnham, I think 7 months ago, said in his lifetime, well, they're both pretty young men. Andy Burnham's a fit young man, as we saw him running at the weekend. They've got many decades to come. So, look, of course we're having a debate about the European Union and our relationship with it. By the way, that's been a debate that's been going on every day in British politics since the Second World War.
You're a Starmerite till you die. Jake Richards.
Well, I'm a Labour supporter and we've got a Labour government. We waited 14 years for it. I'm not going to waste a day in trying to deliver change for British people. That's what we're here to do. And, you know, I'm here to talk about my white paper and plan for youth justice. I'm really proud of it. And there's a lot more we can do.
Jake Richards, thanks very much.
Thanks.
Well, former Labour MP Laura Pidcock and Conservative peer Lord Craig McKinley are on the sofa tonight. Laura, Keir, we saw in the clip earlier, he's digging in, isn't he?
Yes, I mean...
And his ministers are rallying around him.
Yeah, it is interesting when you're watching all of these different discussions about who's going to go where. You'd almost forget they're talking about actually governing a nation. It's somehow some kind of game to these people.
Well, he had his white paper out there, his youth justice white paper.
You know, I mean, to be honest, whether it's conversations about entering into the European Union again or not, or who's going to be the next Labour leader, there's a fundamental issue at the core of all of these conversations is, you know, the Labour Party is imploding because it has had such difficult electoral defeats. We have Reform who gained loads of seats. We've got a Conservative Party who are also in turmoil and a Greens who seem to be picking up seats across the country. But the fundamental question always comes back to what will people do with power? And Starmer has proved time and time again that he has challenged nothing. He has continued with the status quo
and yet,
from the Tories. Austerity continued, you know.
Well, yeah, he's raised taxes a lot. But Craig, I mean, they were already quite high under the Tories. But Craig, he could well end up still in number 10, couldn't he, when you look at the figures in Makerfield?
Yes, and I'll tell you why. I mean, I find it quite odd that this has sort of fulminated against him. He's actually delivered a hugely socialist agenda. He's upped taxes. He's taken or reinstated stopped the 2-child limit. He has done absolutely nothing on welfare. We've had, you know, PIP and everything else has continued its upward spiral.
I genuinely don't.
This
honestly,
is a socialist agenda, as socialist as you could ever imagine. Far more socialist than Tony Blair, for instance.
I don't know what socialist theorists you've been reading, but this is as far away from socialism.
We've got the highest rate of tax since after the Second World War.
Yeah, but it was pretty high under the Tories.
But it's got even higher. So how much more can you tax this economy before everybody gives up? I don't think we're far away from that. You've taxed the people who are making the economy work. Anyone who's an employer, the taxes have been raised. This is a socialist deal. But let's get back to why I think Keir will survive.
Let's not.
Just very quick response from you, Laura.
You're taxing people who are making... You're talking about workers who are producing the wealth of a nation, and there's 14.3 million of them in poverty.
So their employers need to have the national insurance go up to help them. I mean, it's rather bizarre.
I am not here supporting the Labour government, just to be clear. But it is nowhere near a socialist government. We have this is the heart of the problem. People want change, but there are no political parties on offer that are offering that kind of change that could govern.
So why do you think
Can I be very brutal?
Yeah.
There are 270 new Labour MPs. Many of them did not think they would get elected. They were elected mainly because of the split on the right, where you had Reform and Conservatives fighting for the same ground, and we lost out and we ended up with a very shallow but huge victory on in low 30s%, which never happens in the UK. So many MPs are there and they look to Keir Starmer and say, do you know what, it's because of him that I'm in this position that I never expected.
You think there's a residual loyalty? What do you reckon to that, Laura?
Well, and I don't think they will be wanting to change, because there are those arguments by you this evening saying if there's a change of leader, there ought to be a general election. And they have still got another 3 years, and they think, let's just Ride this out.
She looks like she's getting a migraine.
There is no leader that's going to protect me.
It's really, you know, you were a Conservative MP.
Okay.
Keir Starmer is probably one of the worst Prime Ministers we've ever had.
Well, I agree
the country is desperately looking for change, followed by Boris Johnson and Theresa May. But the country is desperately wanting change, and that is not on offer.
Right, pause there, because I've got something I want to show you. In a second, should be here. No, we're gonna have a little look about Saturday Night Live, I think. It's coming.
Not so fast, sunshine.
Oh, that must be our next viewing, Mr.
Burnham. Andy is my first name.
Well, that was Andy Burnham's entrance on Saturday Night Live there, played by Paddy Young. Let's chat about that. I mean, it was quite funny, wasn't it?
I mean, it was okay if you kind of get some of the Westminster bubble jokes, you know, and this is, you know, I don't mean to be cynical and downhearted, but people are really suffering at the moment, and we are now having a national conversation about which faction of the Labour Party will govern, and that's a really desperate situation to be in. Andy Burnham said something that I thought was very, very interesting, that he would stick to the fiscal rules. And those fiscal rules bake in austerity that, of course, was authored by the Conservatives.
Yeah, but it also reassures the bond markets. And if you don't have that reassurance, we're going to be in a Liz Truss situation, aren't we?
He's trying to get elected, right?
The gilt rates now are far higher than when Liz Truss gilt rates went up to about 4.8% for a couple of days. We've been over 5% in the long-term gilt market for months. And Labour said we'd crash the economy on 2 days of 4.8%. They've now had 3 months over 5%. And this has seemed to be situation normal. We need to have a broad discussion about the fundamentals of the British economy. It has not quite yet fallen over. We have a good rate of employment. And yet we have the highest rates of tax and tax take ever in this country.
Apart from the wealthiest in society.
Ever in this country. And we still have to borrow £180 billion. That means we've got something fundamentally wrong, because you cannot keep borrowing.
Laura, I know what
level.
you'll say is fundamentally wrong.
Well, yeah, there's a kind of a faith about the markets. The markets are entirely unelected. We are talking about a politician having to say, we'll stick within these rules that are set by an unelected economic forces that are at play. And that constricts the imagination of what you could do in a nation, how you could grow, how you could get more people into employment, how you can grow wages. But fundamentally, it's not about putting power. Let me finish. It's not about putting power back in the hands of working class people through trade union freedoms and rights. Those have been constricted heavily under the Conservatives, taking power away from working people in the workplace and maintained under a Labour government. So people are asking for change, and this is why I'm saying it's a very frustrating Westminster bubble kind of conversation to have. But change is not on the table.
Well, on Thursday and Friday, when Burnham was sort of in the ascendancy, I think it's softened a bit by Monday today. Mm-hmm. The bond markets went very jittery. We had quite a few basis points of jitter.
Yeah, but they've only softened because he's now briefing out that, you know...
Well, exactly.
Things
this
are
is why
going
he's
to be
having
okay.
to sort of backtrack on EU membership. All of these things that are highly unpopular, that he's said on record over many years, he's now having to roll back on. Now, Laura, I don't want to give you the fundamentals of economics, but if you keep going to your bank and saying, I want another spend up, I want another spend up, I want another spend up, I want to extend my house, they're going to say at some time, hold on, Laura, you can't afford this. Well, that's exactly where we're getting close to on the bond markets. No matter how inconvenient that is the reality of running a country. And this government is almost run amok and destroyed it, very close to destroying it. But for the problem in Iran is going to hasten, I think, the demise of the finance.
So, Laura, until this briefing out about the fiscal rules, what did you make of Andy Burnham's sort of vision, saying that, you know, really nothing had been right in Britain for 40 years? Yeah, that must be music to your ears, mustn't it?
Well, what is... I keep coming back to this. He has been part of that Labour Party and an influential figure in it and made no noises about it. I mean, what I think I agree with in terms of there is a shock coming coming from Iran. The UK was is a
Laura,
participant.
I'm really sorry.
In that
we'll have
through
to,
the use
we'll
of
have
the
to discuss that
UK
another
bases.
time. We'll have to discuss that another time. We're back tomorrow at 7. Bye for now.